back.
Yeah.
Sorry about last week.
Sorry I missed you guys last week. We were sick and busy and had a cancellation and life happened. And then afterwards we were like, crap, we didn't let our audience know. So we're really sorry.
We didn't. And let's just say this. Our cancellation last week is a blessing in disguise. We're not going to share much detail, but our guest that was supposed to be on, her story and what she was on kind of switched a little bit, and it's good things. So we're thankful for that.
That she could share publicly.
Yeah, and she's not allowed to share publicly. So know that they're good things, guys. And so.
Yeah. So we're totally excited to be here tonight, and obviously, that sounds dumb.
She's been off the mic for a while. Maybe we need to rehearse this.
I am like all mumble jumble. I'm Amy Houston, one of your hosts, and we have...
I'm Danielle Valentine, and then we have two guests today who can introduce themselves. But today's topic, we're going to cover several in one, but they do have one big link together. And I know that I, just by having them for a little bit, am so very educated on what they've shared, their stories. So please hit that share button, because we're going to be talking about birth mothers and adoption plans, and maybe the side of the story that we're not used to hearing. So please introduce yourselves. Tell us why you're on tonight, what you're bringing to the table in this discussion, and we'll get started. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Lori Scobie. I'm a birth parent. I'm also a licensed social worker and an Ohio adoption assessor at Caring for Kids in Cuyahoga Falls.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm Caroline Rittenauer. I'm a birth mother, and I teach children with special needs how to swim, and I co-own a meal prep company with my husband. So.
Very busy. Before we get started, is it just me, or do I feel like we're like up against the wall? Can we like alter a little bit? Visually, this might look different, but I feel like we're...
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's...
So we joined around my dining room table, but if I don't measure, and not as skinny as I used to be, it's kind of a little snug. So, sorry about that. But all right, well, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Yeah, so to get started, I love, and obviously, even just the conversations we've had prepping for tonight, Danielle and I have already learned so much, and we hope that everyone's going to come away a little bit more educated. Because like Danielle said, we don't often talk about the side of adoption with the parent that is choosing to give their child a family. And that in itself is something we've learned. A phrase that we'll often use in our society is that you gave your baby up or you gave your baby away. And we're going to talk more about that. But just like the sensitivity to what that parent goes through and the decision that they make. And we want to we'll start a little bit with the stigma. So what is, just to jump right in, what is the rub with saying, oh, you gave your baby up for adoption?
And I appreciate this because that was my first thing. Oh, you gave a baby up? Tell me about it.
Right.
She got right on me. That's not...
So for us, like, I didn't give my baby away at Goodwill, right? So I didn't give her up. I carefully made a plan to not be her parent. I went with an adoption agency, Caring for Kids. I chose her parents. I formulated a relationship with them, and I have an open adoption, so I still see my daughter and have a relationship with her.
How often do you see her?
Once a year, but they live in Colorado. So when I was pregnant, they lived in Cleveland, so I saw them a lot more up until she was about 2. So. But we thank goodness for Facebook and like FaceTime and things like that, so we can continue to have a relationship. But I'm off about something about.
Well, my question right off the bat is when you were making the decision.
Right. So I made a plan. So instead of like I didn't just throw her out. I carefully chose who I wanted her parents to be based on their values and what I would want for her in her future.
And so I'm going to be, I'm just speaking for myself, but probably several of you. So ignorancy as it may, when I heard when a birth parent gives up a child, in my mind, I thought, well, this person just, for whatever reason, lifestyle, money-wise, maybe carelessly got pregnant, didn't plan to get pregnant, messes up their life, all these things. They make this decision, they go in the hospital, they have this baby, and they just give this baby to an agency, and the agency finds it a home. Like, that's what I truly thought happened when that happened. So you sat down and made, You know, you met these parents beforehand. You knew where your child was going, all of these things. So, can I ask you why you made that decision? Like, what formulated?
Why did I make an adoption plan?
Yeah.
So,
why did you?
I've never wanted to be a mom, and I never planned on having children. And I had been asking since I was 18. Am I talking about? Okay. I've been asking since I was 18 to get my tubes tied, and doctors don't believe you. They think you're going to change your mind. They say, "Oh, you're too young. Like, what do you know? You're a woman. You're going to want kids." And then I was 29 in an unplanned pregnancy, and sitting there thinking, like, I should be able to do this. I'm 29. I'm intelligent. I have a 4-year degree. But what it came down to was, like, this is not the right choice for my child for the rest of her life, because I would have resented being a mom, and what that lifestyle would change. And I don't think that that's a healthy environment for a child either, when they have resentful parents. So it was really more about
a very mature decision, you know, and often I think the stereotype or the mindset is,
immaturity.
You were immature to get pregnant. You didn't plan this child, and now you're like, I don't want it, so I'm going to find a different home. You made a very mature decision that you couldn't offer this child the lifestyle that you wanted it to have.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the case in the majority of for the majority of the women that we work with. I know lots of birth parents. I know lots of women who have considered adoption. I don't know a single one who would ever say, I wanted to do this. Even Caroline didn't want to have to do this. She never wanted to be in the position in the first place.
Yeah.
None of us did. But it's not a decision that we want to do. If we could think of any other plan to give our child the kind of life that we want for them, and to give our child the things that we want for them, and not material things, we would do that, and we would parent our children.
Yeah.
But for many of us, and I was 18 when I found out I was pregnant. I was a freshman in college, pre-med major. It's funny the way you described, you know, you were irresponsible, and I know that is the stereotype. But what I say is, I wasn't doing anything differently than anyone else I knew. I just got caught.
Right.
And they didn't.
I can totally respect that.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. The only difference was I got caught. And so I had to make a decision. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was 22 weeks pregnant. So I really didn't have any option other than parenting or make an adoption plan. And for me, it was more important to give my daughter a family that loved her. We could have loved her, but loved each other, and
showing them that example.
Show her that example, and set that example for what she should look for in her own life. And her dad and I, you know, individually are great, but together we would never have been good parents for her, and she deserved that kind of family. And I was willing to sacrifice being her parent in order to give her what she needed. And it's no different than the sacrifices that I made for the 2 daughters that I do parent. They're different sacrifices, but it's the same commitment to sacrifice for your child.
Agree. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know, when you were going through making the decision, at that time, did you feel that you were making an adoption plan, or at that time, did you feel like you were giving up? Like, what were the feelings like then? Like, thinking about maybe women who are going through that now, or might go through that.
Well, I think it's definitely, my daughter that I made an adoption plan for is 30. So things were a lot different. She was born in 1989. The way society viewed single parenting and things like that was very different then. And so, and the language that was used and the services, everything was very different. So for me, I knew I wasn't just like abandoning her and giving her away. I was making a plan. I did work with a social worker. I did go and get prenatal care. I went to the doctor. I knew that her parents were prepared to parent her. But we didn't use the same kind of language. So at that time, I wouldn't have described it as I was making a plan. I probably would have said, I'm giving my baby up because that's what we said. And now I know differently.
It's very
I
different.
know
Very just
that-
terminology.
And is that something your organization works to educate women who come in? Like,
Oh,
you're not
absolutely.
giving up. You're not
Absolutely.
a
And adopted
failure.
parents too.
Right.
Yeah.
And
People who've already made the decision.
we try to
adopt.
educate.
Or no, like the parents, like
yes.
adopted parents.
The
Okay.
parents that are adopting the
Got it.
child
Yeah,
from
Like
the birth
and
mom.
educating
Yeah.
them like what it's
We-
yeah.
Well, that's also
and-
important to tell a child too, because if I was a child and somebody said your mother gave you up, that already digs
Well-
some scars right there. But if somebody told me your mother loved you so much they wanted to give you a better life,
Well, and one
that's
of
a whole different.
Right. And one of
That's
the
a different
things
story.
that
Mhm.
that distinguishes caring for kids from some other adoption agencies is that, and let me preface this by saying I completely understand that we are funded by adoptive parents. That's who pay our bills. I get
Mhm.
that. But we are not in the business of finding babies for adoptive families. We are in the business of helping women make good plans for their children. And so we look for families that meet the needs of birth moms. We don't look for babies who meet the
Mhm.
needs of adoptive families. Because women who are considering adoption as an option for their child need to understand that in the state of Ohio, they have at least 72 hours after that baby is born before they can even fully decide to make an adoption plan. We can't take
Yeah.
a surrender until then. And so until that
And don't they have
point-
up to 6 months then, or something like that?
No.
Oh, okay. So I thought there was.
if a permanent surrender is signed, not a consent to adopt, a permanent surrender, it's exactly that. Once it's
72.
signed, it's
Okay.
irrevocable.
Okay.
But it can't be done until the baby is at least 72 hours
That
old.
makes sense. Okay.
So up until that point, everything that we're doing with that expectant mom or with that new mom is education. We're educating her on whether or not adoption is a good
Is
option,
the right option
for her.
Okay.
And she can decide to parent at any time. This is always her plan. She tells us what this adoption plan is going to look like, and as long as it's legal, that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah.
It's not about me encouraging her to make an adoption plan. It's not about me pressuring her in any way to make an adoption plan. It's just truly about giving her all of the information and telling her that this hurts. If you make this decision, you will grieve this loss for I don't know how long.
Mhm.
I'm 30 years in, and I don't know when it will stop.
Who is Lauren Bajorian
Yeah, we
Pappas?
saw it. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, she's loving on you guys right now. Just so you know. Okay.
Yeah, we love on her too. She's part of us.
So,
Wonderful.
so it's important that women understand that. I don't sugarcoat anything.
Mm-hmm.
I also tell them that everything that we're talking about while you're pregnant, we're making plans for a theoretical baby. And when that real baby comes, we may need to change those plans.
Yeah.
Those plans
Yeah.
So
may
you
need-
talk openly about that through the whole process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
share with every mom that I work with, I share with her the first time I meet her that I'm a birth mom and that I understand what it's like to sit on her side of the table and try to make this decision.
I love that. Does that make you unique in your agency, or are there a lot of you that work there that have that experience?
There are actually 2 birth parents who work at Caring for Kids in the infant program. I know of one other birth mom who works for another agency in Ohio, but we're pretty rare in this field.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that what we bring to the table is unique because
Absolutely.
Oh, 100%.
You're
I
not
agree.
just offering like
You have that
It-
heart.
like,
You have that feeling. You've
you
walked through that.
literally have walked it with them.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that.
And I think that is so very important. And when you say pick a family, so my entire life I've always wanted 3 or 4 children. Like I've always, since I was a little girl, 3 or 4. My mom's like, no, have 1 and be done. My mom had 3.
I'm good with 2.
But my mom had
Peace.
3, but we were all born in different generations. Like literally, like my brother was born in the 70s, I was born in the 80s, my younger brother was born in the 90s, so we were all like 9 to 11 years apart.
That's crazy.
So to my mom, she only did have one kid
That's
at a
like
time.
the
So
worst
she
way
gets
to
it.
have 3 kids.
So she did. My oldest brother is 9 years older, and my younger brother is 11 years younger. So we were only children, and once like the other
Danielle's
one came,
mom, you're crazy.
yeah, she's not. And but to go back to my mom, I'm putting out way more information. I hope she's not. Well, if she's watching, she will love that she's part of this. My mom had my oldest brother when she was 14. So and I had this conversation with her several times. Did you ever think that maybe you shouldn't have him? What did that do to you? How did that change you as a person? And you know, we have said my mom and him grew up together. Like literally, they grew up together. So still to this day, like I'm the only girl, but when my mom's going through something hard and emotional, you think she'd come to me. She goes to him because they're on the same emotional like level because they grew up. She would never say she would have changed her mind, but she will tell you that it was hard and she had to give up a ton and she didn't have the life. She has told me several times, I didn't have the life I wanted to have. And he never had the life he should have had because she made that decision. And but what I was going to, so I've always wanted 3 or 4 children. And so recently, you know, going through my divorce and everything, I went back to going through adoption. And I was like, you know, we were going to do this years ago. I'll look into it again. And I cannot bring myself to adopt a baby any longer from a private adoption because in my head I'm thinking, I can only promise that child one parent. And that's not what I would want to promise my kids. So why would I offer that promise to somebody else? Like I don't think that that's the right thing to do. And so currently I'm going through foster classes and all of that because that's where I can have my heart and help with babies. And if one does come up for adoption or if it's supposed to happen, it will. But I think that, you know, my mom never regretted having my brother, but she will often say he didn't have the life that she wished he could have had. And I think that that's so important to remember that. That's why most of these moms are doing it because they want what that baby deserves. They want the life that baby deserves.
And when I speak, I always talk about how when you're facing an unplanned pregnancy, there's only 3 choices, right? You either parent, you have an abortion, or you make an adoption plan. And so, you know, all 3 of those are difficult.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
you
There's
know,
no easy choice or
there's-
win choice in this.
There's no win-win. It's all hard. All come with sacrifice. All come with, you know, emotional pain.
Yeah.
There is no right or wrong. You know, it's what's best for your child. And that's what's right. You know, there's no so.
And we all have to make the best decision we can in the moment when we have to
Exactly.
make it.
I agree.
And that's what all parents do, really. You know, is you make the best.
Well, that's
decision
how I make
And for your
parenting
child.
every day.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. For your child.
Should I make you breakfast or attempt to let you? Making the
and
best
even-
decision at that moment, not always right.
Like as a mom of 2 boys and seeing how different they are, I make different decisions for each of them differently, literally every single day. So like you can only do your best that you have to offer. And so, I mean, I don't think for the most part, on a very high level, neither decision is wrong. It's going to change per person.
Yes.
Right.
And based on their situation and what's right for them.
And there are lots of women who make adoption plans who either are already parenting children or will have children after they make adoption plans and choose to parent those children. And sometimes those discussions, we get a lot of questions about, you know, how do I talk to these children about it, or will my other children, will this child that I make an adoption plan for be resentful because I parented other kids? And the only answer is I made the best decision for each of my children when those children were born.
Yeah.
And my life, when my first daughter was born, I was a freshman in college. When my second daughter was born, I had been married for 3 years, and I was in a much different place.
Right.
And we have moms who, you know, are parenting children. They may get in a relationship where there's domestic violence. They don't feel safe in order to parent a child, so they make a decision for an adoption plan. They may end up leaving that relationship, getting back on their feet, being stable, getting into a new relationship that's healthier and safe, and they can parent again. But for that child in the middle,
made the best choice.
This was the best choice for that child. And it's never about, I don't want this baby, or I want to give this baby away. It's never about that. It's always about, how can I make the best decision
right now
for this child?
Yeah. So this is something that shocked me when we were chatting before this recording.
The ages.
The ages.
So I was going to bring up.
Because my assumption was that most of these mothers were teen moms.
Yeah.
No.
So talk about that.
Yeah, it's actually pretty rare that.
Wow.
It's pretty rare that we work with and expect that mom will go on to make an adoption plan. It happens sometimes, but that's not what we typically see. That's
what
not
is the
norm.
average age then that you see?
Mid to late 20s, women who are already parenting children. I had one summer where 3 of the moms that I was working with, they were pregnant with two with their 5th child and 1 with their 6th child.
Nope.
And so they were parenting all of those other children, but they knew, they had a very clear understanding of what their family system looked like, what their family system could manage, and they understood that if I bring one more child,
what's that going to do to
system,
all of the children?
All of my children are going to suffer, and everybody has a limited amount of resources. Our resources are finite, and resources aren't just. It's not just about money. It's money and time and energy and a support network, and all of those things go into play.
Yeah.
And do you have transportation? Do you even have a vehicle large enough to take all of your children when you need to go somewhere? Those are very
well, and then it's going to be, you're going to have this. So again, I'm going to be the stereotype, okay? Then why would you have another baby? Why would you get pregnant again if you didn't have?
Because humans have sex.
I think she answered it.
Good night.
I mean,
Good night. That's the show, guys. Good
and
night,
sometimes it works the way.
But what I'm saying is
pregnant.
it's not like even when you're 29, 30 years old, you can get pregnant without being careless. Actually, I've got a couple friends. One I'm thinking of particularly.
Make an announcement.
No announcement. I have a friend that I'm thinking of particularly right now that her husband was fixed. They were done at 4, no more children, tested, everything. Couple months later, she's pregnant. They had to sell their house, move. They had to make huge changes.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah,
That
that's
they
my
were-
greatest nightmare.
Can I hit their house from here with a pitching wedge?
We are not bringing them. We're not mentioning any names.
Here's because I'm just again.
No, because they moved. Because they had to buy a bigger house.
This isn't necessarily so something that I'm sure people watching are thinking, and that I've thought. Honestly, if I were to judge, quote unquote, again, I'm not saying that
We're on the end caps making all of the stereotypes. I'm so glad you're fixing them.
Just think about what people are thinking. If I were to judge any of the moms giving up their adoption, I think the one I'd struggle with most is the one who already had kids. And I think
Why'd you choose those and not this one?
Or what's one more? How do you not just figure it out?
Because sometimes you just can't.
And is it fair to figure it out to your children?
Right.
I can tell you that I have 2 and I'm okay. I could probably do 3. If 4 would come around, I'd be like, we have to move. I have to find a different job. I have to get a different vehicle. All of those things falling in. I do think that, and I want to be very careful how I say that, I do think that I have enough love to give that many children, but just like you said, do I have the resources?
Right.
What is it going to do to my other, what am I taking away from those other children because of this choice that, was not planned?
Especially when there are
per
so
se.
many families out there that would be happy to love on that
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah,
Right.
I agree completely. So, awesome.
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit of your story? Kind of a little bit more of how you, how did you meet? Were you her social work kind of? How'd you guys connect? What you guys do now, together too?
Sure.
Because you had shared that a couple times you do events and stuff like that.
There's a lot in it. That was a big
Yeah, that's
question.
a very big question. So
More of your connection.
I actually met Lori, which I don't actually I remember it now, but when she told me the second time I met her, I actually met you before. I was like, But I met Lori on the day that my daughter's adoption papers were finalized to the court.
Okay.
I was down here at Akron. I was at the courthouse. The social worker I worked with was pregnant and leaving caring for kids to be a stay-at-home mom, and Lori was taking her place. And so now I remember Lori being there, but mostly what I remember is
Oh, well, you were focused.
yeah, and I remember
you're signing-
my social worker, she was this super tiny lady with this cutest belly, and I was like, why don't I look like that pregnant? I remember that.
I wonder the same thing.
She
Why?
looks so cute pregnant. And I was like, I look like a beached whale, right? Why? That's what I remember about the day. And then when I met her the second time, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of have this memory of her being there, but that's about it. But we, so I went to a retreat in Indiana, after 7 months after placing my daughter, and retreat was for birth moms.
That's what I wanted to hear. So there's
Yeah.
still ongoing education support and all of that
Right.
that's offered.
But
Some.
Okay.
It's
and
pretty
so
limited.
Caring for Kids sent me to one, and I came home, and a couple years went by, and I took some other new birth moms with me to it, and we realized it was just so far away that a 5-hour drive is really hard for there and back. You have to take a whole other day off work. There's so many barriers. And so Lori and I started.
When
Go
I
ahead.
came to work at Caring for Kids, I had been a social worker for a long time. I did all kinds of different types of social work. I had never really dealt with my own adoption story. There were very few people who even knew that I was a birth mom. And so when I started working with expectant moms and doing that all the time, it's really hard to do this work on a daily basis if you haven't dealt with your own adoption
Exactly.
stuff.
I can understand that.
So,
yeah.
so I asked to go to a retreat, the same group that Caroline had gone to. I went to that retreat, and it literally changed my life. For the first time in 22 years, I was in a setting where I could speak freely about my adoption, and I didn't have to filter words that I would say because I wasn't concerned about what other people would think.
Because they were all on the same playing field.
Right, because everybody there got it. Everybody got it. And nowhere else in this world had I ever experienced that. And so once I did experience it, and once I had this awakening, I came back and I said, we really need to be offering something like this to the women that we're working with, because going 22 years without it is unacceptable.
Okay.
We don't have to live like that, and we shouldn't live like that. So Jill Davies is my executive director, and she was awesome, and said, well, then let's do a retreat here. Start working on it. And so I got with Caroline.
Yep.
And we talked about our experience at retreat and how we would like ours to look.
Okay.
And so we
drove around, look at all these
looked
different
at sites
spaces.
and set the planning for one, and we've now been doing that. We started out planning one
was so rough.
and it was rough.
It was hard, yeah.
But now we're up to we do 3 a year. We're in our 6th year. We just finished our 6th year of doing retreats. We do 3 a year. We typically have waiting lists for women who want to come. Our retreats are open to birth moms anywhere. We've had women come from Washington State. We've had women come from Utah, from Florida, from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, all over the country, because good post-placement services for birth moms are so scarce that women will travel wherever they have to in order to get them, and to have a community of other women who understand what it's like to make this decision.
And that's exactly, and you said earlier, you're 30 years out and you don't know if you're over it yet.
I know I'm not over it.
There's so many, you hear this often, and I think that you get a lot of, you lose a spouse, or you lose a parent, or, a loved one, you get that grieving has 7 steps, and you're in the process, and then you end. My father passed away.
Grief doesn't work that way.
But that's what get through it. Go to counseling.
Well,
get better.
Up on you.
Get better. Go to counseling. Go through your 7 stages, and you're good. So my father, he's been gone. It'll be 8 years. There are most days that I'm okay, but there are other days that creeps up on me.
Right.
But it's also, though, socially acceptable for you to talk about it. Where, like,
Exactly.
for us,
Yes.
we're not allowed to talk about it.
That's what I was
because
about to
made
say.
That choice.
Exactly.
You did it to yourself.
Why are you sad?
And that's what I'm
Right.
getting at. Like, that's acceptable, though, for me to have a bad day and miss my dad. Like, people are,
Yeah.
oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, you're going through this and da-da-da. But you're right. Where can you go and not be judged?
Right. And there's actually a name for that. It's for what we as birth moms experience. It's called disenfranchised grief, because it's grief that's not recognized socially.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when you have a loss because of death, everybody expects you to grieve, and they accept that and they want to help you.
But they think you made this choice. Why are you grieving?
Mm-hmm.
Right, which is completely ridiculous. It's still my child. I
Mhm.
still lost the opportunity to parent my child, even though I made the decision that I believe was best for my child. And in my particular situation, if I were in the same situation, I would make the same decision for my daughter because it was
So
the
you
right
don't have
decision
any
for
regrets.
her.
Like, you know it was the right thing, but you're still sad and
I
bummed.
regret that I put myself in the position to ever have to make this choice. I do not regret decisions that I made for my daughter because I know that she got exactly the kind of life I wanted her to have that I wasn't able to provide for her.
Yeah.
And if I had to make that sacrifice 1,000 more times in order to give that to her, I would do it every single time, knowing how hard it is and knowing what that road looks like. It was right for my daughter, and as her parent, I'm obligated to make good decisions for her. I'm not obligated to give anybody else a baby, but I am obligated to make good decisions for my child, and that was the best decision that I could come up with at the time.
I love it. So we've talked a lot about maybe the support you guys get as birth parents and that you offer and all of that. Is there any support? So if I were going and adopting a baby and you make an adoption plan and I'm just excited that I got a baby and I'm joyful and all that. How do you prepare that parent though for, if it's an open adoption or closed adoption, like what do they tell how do you as a parent let that child know? 'Cause that story you just told me was basically you loved your daughter very much.
Mm-hmm.
Do you educate them at all on
adoptive parents?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think it's one of it's equally as important. I think,
and that's where
because the way we tell families that come through Caring for Kids and are searching through us or working with us is we say your child should never have a memory of being told that they were adopted. You should start talking about adoption the day you bring that baby home. And you should do that.
That's so important.
You should do that consistently, because if you do that consistently, then it's just a part of who that child is. It's not anything weird. It's not unusual. It's just who you are and how you came to be part of this family.
How do they talk about that?
So,
like, do they have pictures?
Yes.
So since my adoption's open,
yes, I'd love to hear about
it's
what that looks like.
Like it's different depending on age, right? So when she was first born, it was just conversation and things, and then they got pregnant right after adopting. So she has a sister that's biologically her adoptive parents, and then when Aunt Emily got pregnant, right, then it was like, oh, well, Aunt Emily's baby, grew in Aunt Emily's belly, and your sister grew in Mommy's belly, and you grew in Caroline's belly. And I've always been around, so she knows who I am. And then, like, not this visit, but the last year, it was, Caroline's my birth mom, and I have two moms, and, and it was different. She's 6, she's in kindergarten, so it's a little different.
So does she call you mom?
She calls me Caroline. They'll kind of take whatever name. So like when I was pregnant, we talked about that, and they said, "Do you want to be like Mama Caroline?" Like our good friend Lauren that helps us co-facilitate retreats, she's Mama Lauren, and I was like, that's weird to me. Like that just makes me uncomfortable.
Almost sounds like grandma.
Yeah.
We have a Grandma Bev and a Grandma Cheryl. Yeah.
So I didn't want that, and I wanted her to have her own language, like, and her to decide, like, if I got a special name, it would come out of her, and it would be like, you know how some kids will say some weird name when they're little and it'll stick forever.
Mhm.
And whatever she came up with, like, was what we wanted. So, but she's always known she was adopted. You know, and
we have some families who do kind of like rituals with their child. Like, I have a couple of families that got a picture of their child with their birth mother, like from the hospital, and they framed that in the baby's room. And one particular family, the routine every morning when that child got up is whichever parent would come in and get the child up would pick that baby up and kiss him on his head and say, "Mommy loves you," kiss him again, "Daddy loves you," walk him over to the dresser, look at the picture, kiss him on the head again, and say, "Sarah loves you." And every
sweet.
single day,
Figure out the
that
feeling.
was
all the
that
feelings together.
All the
all
feelings
day.
together.
That-
Where's those tissues? I think they're in the.
that was that child's routine. So he knew, he heard that message every day. There was never a question about.
And that is
And
so.
in his perspective, he wasn't given up. He was loved by 3 people.
right.
And that's the
because
thing.
that's the truth.
Like,
Right.
bonus.
Right.
Winning.
Well, it's like Abby's like, I have 2 moms. This is and a dad. You know,
But
Like,
that's
awesome.
so important to give them to that. So, like, when I speak of my dad, it was my stepdad. I never met my real dad. And, you know, growing up, even though I had an amazing mom and I had an amazing stepdad, and when my stepdad passed away, I have an even amazinger stepdad that raises my babies now. I don't think that I ever had a lack, but I always did feel like there was a part of me missing. And did they love me? And even though they didn't see me, did they love? Like, I
Okay.
wondered that.
I can explain this for you.
But my mom would always tell me it's okay to have multiple
Right, there's
parents because you have more people who
It's
love
a
you.
great
Yeah.
thing
But as
to
a
have-
child, it's different.
it's a great thing to have lots of people who love you. But that feeling that you had, it's because every human being, when you try to think about your life,
Mhm.
and we all have a life puzzle
yeah,
that we're putting together. If you are adopted or you're not raised by your biological parents for whatever reason, if you're adopted, your adoptive parents have a lot of your puzzle pieces.
hmm
Your birth parents have a lot of your puzzle pieces. If either side, your adoptive parents or your birth parents, decide to withhold your puzzle pieces, how do you put your puzzle together, your life puzzle together?
Yeah.
And every single human on this planet has a right to all of their puzzle pieces. And adoptive parents don't need to be insecure enough that they feel they need to withhold the puzzle pieces. And I hold birth parents to a pretty high standard too. I say if you go into an open adoption and you make this decision because it's best for your child, you're obligated. It's
Yeah.
a commitment. We need to give these humans their puzzle pieces so that their puzzle can be as complete as possible. All of us don't.
And I think that is so important because you're right. I was very loved,
Right.
had a great family, but I always felt that there was so much of me
You're
missing.
like, this one piece just doesn't fit.
Yeah,
You're
and
like
then
trying
there'd
to
be
figure
so
out
many
where it
times
goes.
here and there, somebody would make a comment of, "Oh, you're like your dad because of that," and I'd be like, "What do you mean? Tell me more.
So, and
What do you mean?"
That's one thing
Yeah.
that like with Brooke and my daughter's parents, like when their parents visit, they see in her sister like, oh, you look just like your, you know, and you did this just like your dad, or this is just like your mom. But if I wasn't involved in an open relationship, when we're Skyping and we take this picture side by side, because that's what Skype does, and Abby's looking and she's like, I have your nose and I have your lips. And like she reads just like me. So like when I go, it's how many books are in your suitcase for me? And are we gonna read while you're here? And like
There's
you and
those
I-
things.
Gets to have that genetic.
yeah,
like,
so there's a lot of so like we're readers and like we're both like quiet morning people. Like we would both be up now because they're on the West Coast and it's Ohio time and
It's different.
different there. But like we're sitting there and we're both like just reading and quiet, you know, and that's our morning and that's great. But then
But you see
That
those
is
little
so
sparks.
yeah,
sweet.
you know, and
Abby-
mommy and daddy aren't so much a book people.
And-
like,
and-
you know,
Yeah.
so funny like with that
Yeah,
stuff.
and
That's
Caroline's
so sweet.
Caroline's daughter Abby has her puzzle pieces.
She
She's
doesn't have any
able to say,
questions.
I know why I love to read because Caroline loves to read.
Mhm.
I know why my nose looks the way it looks because Caroline's nose looks that way. If if Abby didn't have that, Abby wouldn't have her pieces. Abby couldn't put her puzzle together.
Yeah.
And
It's so good to look at that way.
Why would we withhold someone's puzzle pieces? And they get all of them.
Because
I mean, I'm not
mostly they're
saying
I'm withholding this information to protect them.
No,
I'm
we don't-
withholding this information because it's the best for you. Like that. That's
That's-
what I was told.
That's because that's what's best for the adoptive parent.
Exactly.
That's not
Yeah.
what's best for the child.
Mhm.
I'm not
And
saying
that's so important. And let me segue real quick and throw in that line. So when families are separating and you've got all of that, everybody knows where I'm going. You may not like that other person very much, but it's their puzzle piece.
yeah, and that's still your child's parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we actually
Whether
talk
they
about
are
that.
all those names that you call them or not.
Right. And we talk about that at retreat, that we, like Abby's birth father is not in the picture. And, but I still speak about him with respect
Yes.
because I love my daughter. And so that means I have to love the pieces that made my daughter my daughter. I can say I made a bad decision with this person, but this is your father and I will respect him because he's your father.
And if we don't respect the child's biological parents, we don't respect the child.
Yeah.
And when we say, your dad is this or your mom is this, or then the child owns that.
Mhm.
And that's not for that child to own.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Your
I'm
job
not-
is to ultimately protect and respect.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that you dump every puzzle piece on a 2-year-old child. And you do it.
Yeah,
you do
yeah.
it.
They
correct.
can only do age appropriate puzzles, guys.
You
do
do.
not buy
I
the
think it's important to
$1,000
stress,
puzzle.
like, there's pieces of the puzzle that will come as they age.
Sure,
But I
yes.
love the point of, like, it should never be that they remember the day they learned they were
Right.
adopted.
And-
I think that's important.
And that, like,
Yeah.
she's able to ask me questions about anything and I can be truthful about
That's
that.
important.
Because if she's asking the question, she's thinking about it, So she's asked me if there's been any other babies in my belly before or after, or if I'm planning on it, right? And
Okay.
she was like,
Right.
I was like, no, and no. And she's like, okay, that's it, And she was on
Yeah.
her merry way. That's all she wanted to know, And then,
Yeah.
And for her parents, because open adoption is best for birth moms, because it helps them to be able to see that the decision that they made was a good one for their child's
So
healthy
that helps
and
with
healing.
healing.
Yeah.
So
Birth
it's,
mom.
it's good
Okay.
for the birth mom. It's good for the child. We've talked about that because they get their puzzle pieces. It's also good for the adoptive parents, because if Abby's parents didn't have access to Caroline and Caroline's information, when Abby asked those questions, they would either have to say, I don't know, and
Or
not
make it
answer
up.
it,
Or
or
make
they
it
would
up.
make something up that might be completely inaccurate.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the likelihood is Abby will make up her own story about how to answer those
The
questions.
hidden hand
Right.
that
And,
appears.
and we all know what, like, the Brene stuff, right? The story we tell ourselves in our head does if you don't have all the information, right? You
Yeah.
make up these wild, crazy
Oh, yeah.
stories.
You're so creative when it's in your head.
and it's usually negative towards
Right.
yourself.
It's all negative.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're convinced that they're a terrible child.
We
and
had
that was why.
We had we worked with a therapist who shared a story about a teenage child
I just seen it.
who about a
what's going on.
Sorry.
I don't have my phone.
There is
Sorry.
visually on a record, a hand just appeared, grabbed a glass, and magically refilled it and put it back, and it looks so funny on screen.
Oh, that's right, because there's a delay.
I am
Yeah.
so sorry.
That's okay. So this therapist shared a story about working with a teenager who had been adopted from birth, and as she entered her teens, she was having a lot of behavioral issues and a lot of problems, and was using drugs, was drinking, had issues with promiscuity, all kinds of things. And when she got into therapy, she disclosed to her therapist that she was doing the things that she was doing because of her birth mom. And her birth mom had run away with a carny and was an alcoholic and was using drugs, and so she couldn't help the things that she was doing. It was just who she was because that's who her birth mother was.
But was that truth or was that
The
what she was told?
therapist spoke to the adoptive parent who shared, no, her birth parents were both in veterinary school and were very successful. They were high achieving, but they just weren't prepared to parent. Those adoptive parents had that information from the day that child came into their home. They chose not to share it, and because they chose not to share it, this girl developed her own story that made sense to her in her head about why this decision would have been made for her. Yeah. And she created this false story, and then she made choices in her life based on that story. And potentially her adoptive parents could have prevented that just by telling her the truth about who she was and where she came from.
Yeah.
She had there was nothing shameful in her conception and the decision to make an adoption plan for her. Yeah. But because they chose not to share it, they created a problem.
A friend of mine, Sarah, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'd love for you to touch on it with her. She said, these are very perfect world stories. However, there are very real stories that birth parents are very misguided individuals that children do need to be protected from.
Remember that the women that we're talking about are making voluntary adoption plans.
Yes.
These are not women who have had their children removed. Some of them may have had other children removed for safety
and
issues.
In those situations are very different.
Very different.
Yes.
Very different.
So Sarah, I just want to make sure that and I know you tuned in a little bit later, Sarah.
And here's the thing that I would also say. Even for the moms that we work with who have addiction issues or have mental health issues or have criminal histories or anything like that, even if there's a safety issue for their child, this is what we're talking about is voluntary. Moms come to us, they ask for our services, they voluntarily work with us to make a plan for their child. Regardless of what other choices they have made in their past or what choices they may make in their future, the decision that they're making right then in that moment to make a good plan for their child is commendable. Mm-hmm. It is a good parenting decision. Everything else in their life might be chaos, but in that moment they're saying, okay, I still got to do the best thing I can for this baby. And they're saying, I'm going to do this right.
And it's a very different situation, at least in some regards, from like a fostering situation.
Very different.
Been removed.
And we will be doing, we will be covering more of those types of stories where we've got a couple foster parents and a social worker coming on to kind of discuss when it's not voluntary and that. And in those situations, those are different, but I was not a foster child, but you saying the puzzle pieces, I do think that there still should be, yes, protect the child. Yes, maybe not make them exposed to it. However, still talking, you don't have to be always positive, but don't be negative about that biological parent are important tips. So,
those children who are in foster care are indeed still humans.
Yeah.
They do still need their puzzle pieces.
So it's important right now to touch on the fact that tonight's show is about ladies that have elected to give their child to a loving home. We do have a question right now coming in from the audience I want to bring to your attention, to the two of you. These are very perfect world stories.
That's what I read. That's the whole thing we're talking about.
Oh, that's what they were talking about. Okay. All right.
Sorry, he is way delightful.
No, I'm managing a lot of stuff. So love you, bye.
Yeah. So and I wouldn't. These are just it's a different scenario, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about adoption is there are different kinds of adoption. There are different types of adoption. There are different circumstances by which children become adopted. And my child was never at any risk had she ever been in my care. Caroline's daughter was never at any risk had she been in her care. The women that, like I said, the women that we are working with are coming to us voluntarily, and they're making this plan because they believe it's what's best for their child. And there's never been any harm to that child.
So I have a couple questions. We are getting close to end time here. So I just have a couple questions I want to wrap up with. One is, we've talked a lot about the benefits of open adoption. If someone does choose a closed adoption, do you have any advice to them on how they could give that child their puzzle pieces, even if they're not going to be there to be on a FaceTime and show their nose and talk about books?
Yeah.
Like, how can you, if you're choosing that route, how could you still give a puzzle piece?
Well, first of all, I would never suggest that be the choice
Okay,
that
that's
anyone
good to
makes.
know.
Yeah.
I
It does happen.
I believe it's very important. Lots of times, expectant moms may come to us thinking that they want a closed adoption because they don't understand openness and they don't understand why it's important for their child. They don't understand what is available to them, what they could have, and so it's my job as a professional to fully educate them on what those options are. And if I've done that, and if I've explained to them what their options are, why research shows that it's better for children, and they still say, I want a closed adoption, I respect that decision. But I'm not going to just let somebody walk in my door and say, I want a closed adoption, and I'll say, okay, and we just keep going.
Yeah.
That's unethical in my opinion.
And even my daughter's adoptive parents thought they wanted a closed adoption until they heard a panel of birth moms speak about what open adoption meant to them and like about open adoption, and that was before I met them. But that whole like shifted at that point for that, even those adoptive parents.
Right.
Cool.
So yeah.
Because again, most adoptive parents, if they are saying that they want a closed adoption, it's either because they're not educated about why openness is important, or because they're afraid of, they have unrealistic fears about birth moms and negative stereotypes about who we are and what we may choose to do. Or they're not secure enough in their own role as a parent to accept openness and accept a relationship with that child's biological parents. And so again, as adoption professionals, it's our responsibility to educate those families about what they're really getting into and what you're setting your child up for if this is the choice that you make.
Yeah. And that's so important. So very important.
Yeah. Another question to wrap it up. You guys talked about the value of having those support groups, because I think from the outside looking in, it's easy to assume that making the decision and passing your baby over and letting someone else raise them is where the grief ends. And we've learned tonight that that's not true.
No.
Obviously. That's probably where the grief begins.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
And I'm super secure in my adoption, and I still grieve.
Me
Like
too.
I leave and I'm bawling. Abby, when I get there, she'll say, "You can't cry when you leave," and I'm like, "Well,
That's so
I can't
cute.
help it." Like I,
Mhm.
you know, I
So
told
there's-
you couldn't cry. And I'm like,
Aw.
"Yeah, like, what are you supposed to do?"
So I think for those of us that know birth moms, I mean, be conscious and aware of what they're continuing to feel throughout their life. But then also, how can, if there's any birth moms watching tonight that are like, I don't have that, like, how can they get
In touch and
connected?
connect.
Right. We have a Facebook group.
Private group.
Private. Well, we have two groups, but there's a private Facebook group. You have to answer a couple questions about like being a birth mom, so that we know, because we don't want people that are not birth moms or expectant moms in our group, because we don't ever want to have like a coercion situation.
Yes.
So we keep expectant moms out of our group, so they can join that. It's caring for birth mothers. Caring for birth mothers support group. Do you know how many women are in there? Because there's a lot.
Not approximately 950 women from all across the country,
Wow.
the UK, Canada, and Australia. And I mean, almost 1,000 of us, you know,
Just
in
in
one
our
That's
group.
just in that
It's in our
group.
group.
Right.
We'll share that group in the next couple of days on our page.
Yeah.
So if anybody is interested in that, we'll share the link.
And then
Again, for birth parents only.
birth
moms.
mothers. Yes, there are some birth parent groups out there that exist.
Okay.
We do those retreats 3 times a year. Anyone's welcome to come. We do some pizza meetups too.
Those are really they're really like support groups, but people don't want to come to support groups, but people like to come for free pizza.
Mhm.
So they're pizza meetups.
Yeah.
We do them pretty much monthly in Akron at Mr. G's on West Market. We do them in
Good pizza.
Yeah, it's good
great.
pizza too.
I only eat the cheese.
We do them in Columbus every other month, and we do them about 3 times a year in the Youngstown area. So those are face-to-face opportunities. Women who have been to retreat come to pizza meetups. Women who think they might like to come to retreat but aren't sure come to pizza meetups. Women who just
My
need
husband will
support.
come sometimes, and sometimes they'll bring their partners.
Yeah,
birth-
pizza meetups are open to
children,
birth parents, both mothers and fathers.
Yeah.
Support people. If they need to bring their other kids because they don't have childcare, they can do that. We really try to make it as accommodating as we can.
Super accessible.
Right.
Yeah. And then I'm working on some other projects, but we're not there yet. I'm trying to create some online education for women post placement, so that there's like
Wow.
pods of learning. Because we do it at retreat, but like if you live clear, like what if money is a barrier or time off work? Because it's not
Or
just
childcare.
covering, you're right, childcare, and like it's not even just covering the cost of getting to retreat. It's the work I'm missing, and all those things.
Exactly.
So that like we can try to, like, we don't want people to be 22 years in and never talk to anybody. Or we just had a woman at a retreat last weekend that was 16 years in and never met another birth mom, and
Wow.
10 years in, and I was 7 months out, and I was like, I think that's part of why I'm as okay as I am. So we want to try to figure out ways
Because that's
to
just
reach.
your personality. Is you're a go-getter. You're the one that's going to go out and find the community and the people.
They sent me. They made me go. I swore I was never going back.
But
now
and
I've
that
done,
and that's
years
the
of
thing that I would say too, and I'll say this to Caroline because we've talked about it. The Caroline that you see right now is not the same Caroline that went to her first retreat. The Lori that you see right now is not the same Lori that went to retreat. This Lori is not the same Lori who made an adoption plan 30 years ago. This is a lot of hard work and a lot of effort that we've put into fixing our own shit and helping other people fix theirs. And by helping other people fix theirs, we grow.
Yeah.
snowballing.
You help others, you grow.
Yeah, and that's so. What you see before you today is
a lot of work.
a lot.
But it shows where you could be. And there might be people watching who have no idea that there's support groups out there that think, you know, they may have this secret in them that not even many people know. They made this 22 years ago, and they're, I switched friends in 5 years, 10 years, totally a different.
You moved to a new place.
Yeah, nobody knows, and they're sitting here with this secret that they've never actually healed from.
Right, and it doesn't need to be a secret. It's not anything shameful. Making a good decision for your child is not something shameful. It's not something that we should be embarrassed about. It's something that we should celebrate. That's what great moms do. They sacrifice for their kids, and that's what birth moms do.
Well, I love how you keep saying your child, because our natural stigma is not to think that way as a society. So just to hear you say that, it changes. I've been completely enlightened tonight. It changes my perspective. And I told you, we're around this stuff. I've seen it this week on both sides, right? And it's just, so thank you.
Good. I say that if I can change one misconception that one person has about adoption every day,
You changed a lot of mine.
I will die as a success if I can just do that one thing for one person every day. And I could talk for days and about the misconceptions that people have.
And I love the fact that you guys are still so passionate about this. You still both admit that days are hard, and neither of your daughters are 1 year old. Like 12 and 30. 8. Sorry, because I thought I heard 12.
That's
Yeah, and
8.
yeah.
8 and 30, but like that's not super young. So this is like a lifelong thing you guys are going through.
Absolutely.
And I'm really thankful that you came and shared this with us and enlightened Danielle and Hank and I. And so thank you for joining
Thanks for
us.
sharing with the audience too. And so we're going to keep this discussion open. As always, any questions, if you want to reach out, We had a show a couple weeks ago. We had several people reach out privately. We can have those conversations with you. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions, we will get you in contact with them. If they don't have the answers, which I'm sure they will, I'm sure that they will connect you. We'll share that group. So if you are a birth mother and looking for a little bit extra support, they are definitely the ones to connect with. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you.
And being open-minded.
Yeah.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
exactly.
Yes. All right, guys. Good night. We'll
What
see you next
SIP
week.
is all about.
This Sip of Solidarity podcast is a copyright of the 330 To Go Media Network. Thank you for tuning in.